Fantasy Philosophers is brought to you by fantasy-info.com.
In our bust section this year for 2010, we have some interesting names again that are on this list that we have. Some people are going to be really high picks. Some people are just going to be mid-range type players. Some players are players that have had really good success, and we feel that maybe they've topped out and they're not going to get it done for you from here on in. As far as our bust rankings go, there are varying degrees of what a bust is, and I think that you look at some of these guys on this board now, obviously a Phillip Rivers, a Tom Brady, those guys are still going to be productive players. They're still going to be guys that are probably worth starting on your fantasy squads this year. I wouldn't expect them to not be, but it just depends on your expectation. I think that's what we really need to talk about here with some of these high-range bust players, if you will, like a Dallas Clark, maybe a tight end that we have listed here, or even a Deshaun Jackson, Reggie Wayne type player, Steven Jackson, Ryan Grant type player that we have listed right here. With guys like a Steven Jackson, let's take him for example. I've seen a lot of leagues where he's still going as a first-round pick in 12-team leagues, and that's not necessarily just in PPR leagues either. It's in standard straight leagues. I think that's just too high for him, and if you're expecting him to be your number one guy, I believe he's going to leave you hanging. He's been leaving people hanging for years, truthfully, as far as, putting up the kind of numbers that we would expect from him and putting up the kind of numbers that really he's being drafted to put up, and it's pretty obvious why. I think talent-wise, he probably is a top 5 running back. I've said that over and over again, but in fantasy, you have to look at much more than just a talent of a player alone, and he is on the worst team in football. I still hold out hope that maybe for a player like this that his offensive line can gel. They did bring in some talent last offseason, but it really didn't click last year. Maybe that can click this year. I think A.J. Feely, he is a better quarterback than what they had a year ago, so hopefully that helps a guy like that. But if you're drafting him as a number one, I think he's going to be a bust for you in that particular area. So he's still a guy that, you would start, definitely. But if you're expecting him to be a high-range guy, there's going to be other people around you. I just want to get, let's put it down this way. There'll be other people around you. They're going to take advantage of, having stronger first-type picks. And they're going to beat up on you because you better have stronger picks that you're taking later on, because that's not necessarily the type of guy you want to start off with a team that he's on right there. So that's just an example. We have to talk about somebody like a Vincent Jackson per se. Here's a guy that really is in a situation that looks like suspended the first 3 games of the year in a holdout. They're saying potentially he could hold out for the first 10 games of the year. Don't think that'll happen. I still hold out. I don't think he'll be traded. I think if we see that, it may even happen here in the next month, but we'll just have to find out. But there's a lot of drama going on right now, and I think fantasy owners, the first thing we need to see from him to stop feeling so the situation is so volatile is to start seeing him get back into camp. So those are just some examples of players that we have here on this board that may have lowered expectations, that should have lowered expectations for them than maybe where they've been going. One last point that I do want to make, and this could hold true for a guy like Vincent Jackson in that particular case, is that a guy that was a pretty obvious bust player that we didn't like last year was Brandon Marshall. But I know one league that me and my dad happened to be in, he lasted all the way until the 9th round of the draft. It was in about the last week before the season started in September. It was right after he got the suspension from Denver. I think that was the final straw for a lot of fantasy owners that drafted late, is that, seeing that, it was just like, okay, I'm not touching Denver and I'm not touching Brandon Marshall with all the things that are going on there. So we got him cheap. So there definitely comes a time on your list where a guy, you just sit back and say, wow, I had him as a guy that was looking to go in probably the 2nd round, and all of a sudden, here's a guy who's dropping into the 7th or 8th round, and at some point there, he becomes a value pick and not a bust. So that's a particular situation, and a guy like Vincent Jackson could find himself in that spot again. He could be this year's Brandon Marshall. Obviously, Brandon went on and had a pretty good season, and so you don't want to discount a guy too much, and at some point, they become a value. So look for these guys maybe a round or 2 lower than maybe you're seeing them go in mock drafts right now, and that's probably decent value. And some guys, maybe in a case like Vincent Jackson, see if he just drops in the draft. If he keeps sliding and you get to that point where you're getting 6th, 7th, 8th round, it's like, well, maybe I will take a shot on him here. But we'll just have to see how his situation goes, but that's something to keep in mind with busts. That's the last point I wanted to make with this, is that, again, at some point, if a guy keeps dropping, he's not so much a bust anymore. He's actually becoming a bit of a value player for you to have. And once again, we just want to let you know that if you're listening to this out there on the internet, maybe on YouTube for a video, we've got this, what we're talking about here, available for you. There's a link. It should be a link at the bottom of where this video is at, right underneath the text. And you can click on that link. You can go over and you can download this information that we're talking about. You can print it out for yourself to use at your draft. We have that available for you. And if you're also listening to this on a podcast, maybe like Podbean, Mepedia, any one of those, Blueberry, any of those type of places, that should also be incorporated. There should be an article with this as well, and there should be some type of link there for you to get back to the specific page that we're talking about for this cheat sheet or mock draft that we happen to be talking to you about right now. Good luck this season, and we hope that this information helps you have success.
For more fantasy football information, go to fantasy-info.com and sign up for our free e-newsletter. Good luck in your 2010 Fantasy Football League. As an added bonus, the Fantasy Info guys will include their 5 secret tips for success in fantasy football with your free